Welcome to your Get That Nugget for GCSE English Literature. Today we're going to be concentrating on giving you a model for how you write an introduction that contains a thesis for your love and relationships poetry questions. This session is here to complement your lessons with your teachers and is not here to replace them in any way, shape or form. So last session we had a look at planning an answer for a question about Before You Were Mine and Mother Any Distance. So just a reminder of what that question was. Before You Were Mine, compare how poets present family relationships in Before You Were Mine and in one other poem from Love and Relationships. We focused on Mother Any Distance and we looked at how we plan that essay using the list structure. So a paragraph on language, one on imagery, one on structure and one on theme. And then whilst we recognised that not everything was the same across the two poems, they both presented the same relationship, they both value the relationship, and the poems are there for very different reasons. Now, what's really important when we are writing an answer to a question, it's very important that we have a clear guiding principle, a clear thesis statement that we are looking to prove throughout our essay. So if we think about an essay as being like a human, so here is your head, here is your body, your legs, your arms. This here is your thesis statement. This is what keeps the rest of the body together. This is the argument that runs through. And then the body of the essay are your list paragraphs. But they are all linked by your thesis statement. So we said that both poets are presenting the same relationship, both poems are valuing that relationship. So both represent mother-child relationship. Both value relationship. Written for different reasons. Now essentially that, if we put it into a sentence or sentences, becomes our thesis statement. That is not the entirety of your introduction, because within your introduction you want to touch on all of the assessment objectives. So assessment objective 1, which is to understand the text and respond to the text. Now respond to the text just means essentially have an opinion, have some ideas about it, have some thoughts about it. Choose quotations or evidence, and to be clear, your evidence does not always have to be a quotation. It can be a reference to a moment in the text. It can be a description of how punctuation is used. And then to answer the question. The question is asking you to write an essay, and therefore your ability to write an essay counts, which is why we're looking at thesis statement and how we're going to structure our introduction. AO2 is about writer's craft and intention. And therefore you're looking at what the writer does and why they do it. And then AO3 is context. What affects the reading of the text? What gives us additional insight? So in the case of Before You Were Mine, we know that Carol Ann Duffy's mother has died. We know that she was brought up during the 60s, and therefore, you know, certain cultural and social things have had an impact on her life. So once we've got all of these ideas together, we have our plan. We then need to look at how we write our introduction. And this would be an introduction to answer that question. So both poets present the relationship between a child and their mother, with both directly addressing the mother. The relationships are shown to be close, although it seems that Before You Were Mine is written following her mother's death, whilst Mother Any Distance is written at a time of change as the sun moves out. In both poems, there is a focus on change, the change in a relationship or the way a person changes. Both poets express love for their respective parents, but Duffy also expresses regret at not having known her mother before she was her mother, whilst Armitage is grateful for the grounding influence of his mother. There is a sense of ownership in both, but whilst in Mother Any Distance the poet is breaking away from the control, Duffy acknowledges that it is the very occurrence of her birth that has created a different mother, as she is now owned by her child and her role. So I want to show you where each of those assessment objectives comes in there. So we start initially at the top. Both poets present the relationship between a child and their mother, with both directly addressing the mother. Now, I've highlighted that pink because that is AO1. However, it is also AO2 because we're looking at writer's technique. What is key as well is that we've talked about both poems from the start, and the question requires you to talk about both poems. So it is much more sensible to do that instantly so that you don't forget all the way through. If you do not write about both poems, you will limit the amount of marks you can get for AO1. So the relationships are shown to be close. And then here, although it seems that Before You Were Mine is written following her mother's death, that is context, whilst Mother Any Distance is written at a time of change as the sun moves out. This is context and AO1 because it is understanding of the poem. It's a response to the question. In both poems, there is a focus on change, the change in a relationship or the way a person changes. Again, that's writer's technique, writer's intention, but it is also understanding of the poem and understanding of the question. Both poets express love for their respective parents, but Duffy also expresses regret at not having known her mother before she was her mother. And here, across these, we are hitting all of the assessment objectives at once because we are understanding the poem, we are understanding the question. We are also recognising what the poet is doing, why the poet is doing it. And again, we have that context around Before You Were Mine. There is a sense of ownership in both, but whilst in Mother Any Distance, the poet is breaking away from the control. Duffy acknowledges that it's the very occurrence of her birth that has created a different mother, as she is now owned by her child and her role. So this is much closer to AO2, whereas this is AO1. Now, what you can see is that throughout there is not a chunk of AO1 at the beginning, then AO2, because we are writing in general about the poems, because we are setting ourselves up in order to write the rest of the essay. All of those assessment objectives are intermingled in there, but they are all in there, and we are acknowledging both poems throughout. So Previously, we planned the essay on Before You Were Mine and Mother Any Distance. At that point, I asked you to do the same, but using Climbing My Grandfather rather than Mother Any Distance. So now, using that plan, write another introduction using Climbing My Father rather than Mother Any Distance. Okay, so I'll leave that there for 30 seconds or so. You are going to recreate another introduction, but using the plan you did after the last session, which used Climbing My Grandfather.